The hospital room was quiet, except for the beeping sound of a machine nearby. An old black man sat on the edge of the hospital bed. He wore a plain white gown. His short white hair showed his age, and his eyes, though tired, were calm. He looked sad, but did not complain. His hands rested gently on his lap, and he stared at the floor, waiting for someone to help him. A white woman stood near the door. She was a nurse, wearing a clean white uniform and a stethoscope around her neck. Her black hair was pulled back into a tight bun. She had a cold look on her face and kept her arms crossed. Instead of looking at the old man, she stared at the wall, as if she didn't want to be in the room. She didn't say anything. Her white hospital sneakers didn't move from their place near the door. The old man turned his head slowly and gave a polite nod toward the nurse. "Excuse me, miss," he said gently. "Am I going to be seen today?" The nurse didn't answer right away. She glanced at him for a second, then looked away again. "Just wait here. Someone will come," she replied with a flat voice, not making eye contact. She didn't move closer or check on him. The old man nodded again and looked back down. He didn't argue. He was used to waiting. He had been sitting in different hospital areas for hours that day. When he first came in, he had waited in the emergency lobby for a long time. Now he was finally in a room, but no one had helped him yet. A few more minutes passed. The nurse didn't speak again. The room stayed still. Then the door opened. A tall black man walked in wearing a charcoal gray suit. He had no hair on his head, and he carried himself with quiet confidence. The moment he saw the old man sitting on the bed, his whole face changed. His serious expression turned soft, full of emotion. "Uncle Joe," he said with surprise. The old man looked up slowly. The tired look on his face brightened a little. He gave a small smile. "Roland," he said. The man in the suit didn't wait. He stepped forward and wrapped his arms around the old man with care. It was a hug full of respect and warmth, not rushed or forced. He held the old man for a moment, as if showing the whole room what this man meant to him. The nurse near the door stood still, not saying a word. Her arms were still crossed, but now her eyes slowly turned toward the two men. There was no sound except the quiet hum of the machines and the emotion hanging in the air. Something had changed in that room. Dr. Roland Banks pulled back gently from the hug and placed a hand on the old man's shoulder. He looked at him with deep concern. "Why didn't you call me?" Roland asked softly. "You shouldn't have come here alone." The old man gave a faint smile. "Didn't want to trouble you, boy. Thought I could just walk in, get checked, and leave." Roland shook his head slowly. He turned and looked around the room. When his eyes landed on the nurse near the door, his face changed. He noticed her stiff posture, the way she avoided looking at the patient, and the way she kept her arms crossed as if she didn't want to be part of the situation. "Has he been seen by a doctor yet?" Roland asked the nurse, his voice calm but firm. The nurse shifted slightly but still didn't step forward. "Not yet. We're short-staffed today. I was waiting for the assigned nurse to come." Roland narrowed his eyes. "He's been here for hours, and you couldn't even offer basic care." The nurse didn't answer. She looked at the floor now, her arms slowly lowering. Roland looked back at the old man. "Come on, Uncle Joe. Let's get you taken care of properly." He helped the old man lie back on the bed gently and adjusted the pillow behind him. He then turned to the small computer screen nearby and began reading the patient file. A younger nurse walked past the door and paused when she saw the scene inside. She stepped in quickly. "Director Banks," she said politely, "I can take over from here." Roland nodded. "Thank you, Jasmine. Please make sure my uncle gets the attention he deserves." Jasmine smiled at the old man. "Of course. We'll take good care of you, sir." She moved closer, checking his blood pressure and asking questions in a kind voice. The old man answered her with calm and respect. Roland looked back at the first nurse. "This man helped raise me when my mother was working double shifts. He taught me about hard work, about respect. The least he deserves is to be treated like a human being." The nurse said nothing. She finally uncrossed her arms and gave a small nod, then turned and walked out of the room. Roland sighed and turned his focus back to the old man. "Just rest now, Uncle Joe. You're in good hands," he said, his voice softer now. Jasmine continued her work, carefully checking the old man's condition and taking notes. The room felt lighter now. The tension that had filled it before was slowly fading. The beeping machine, once the only sound, now blended with Jasmine's calm voice and the quiet hum of care being given at last. Outside the room, the hallway was busy, but inside, it was finally peaceful. The old man closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, knowing he was no longer invisible. Jasmine worked quickly but gently. She checked the old man's blood pressure again and wrote the numbers on the chart. She asked him questions about how he was feeling and listened carefully to each answer. Her voice was calm and clear. The old man, still lying back on the hospital bed, answered with short, simple words. He didn't complain, even though it was obvious he had been uncomfortable for a long time. Roland stayed close by, watching everything with care. He didn't speak much, but his eyes followed every move Jasmine made. He trusted her. She had worked at the hospital for years and was known for being kind to every patient, no matter who they were. "Sir, do you feel dizzy at all?" Jasmine asked. The old man nodded slowly. "A little bit, yes. Comes and goes." She wrote that down, then took out her flashlight to check his eyes. "We'll get some tests done soon," she said. "Just hold on a bit longer." Roland stepped forward. "Make sure they check everything. Blood work, heart scan, whatever he needs." Jasmine nodded without hesitation. "Already requested it, sir." As they worked, a few hospital staff passed by the door, peeking in quietly. Some had heard what happened. News spreads fast in a hospital. People talked in whispers about how the director had hugged a patient and how upset he looked when he realized that patient had been ignored. In the corner of the hallway, the nurse from earlier stood near the wall. She wasn't in the room, but she could still see inside. Her arms were no longer crossed. She stood still, thinking, her eyes focused on the man who had once waited for her help. She looked unsure, maybe even regretful. Inside the room, Jasmine helped the old man sit up a little more, placing another pillow behind him. She offered him a small cup of water. "Thank you, young lady," he said softly. "You're welcome," she replied with a gentle smile. Roland pulled out his phone and made a quick call. He spoke in a low voice, asking someone to make sure a doctor came to review the old man's case within the next 10 minutes. "We'll take care of you now, Uncle Joe." "Properly this time," Roland said, turning back to him. The old man nodded slowly. "I know you will, son. You always did things right." A few moments later, another nurse brought in a wheelchair and some supplies. Jasmine carefully helped the old man into the chair, making sure he was comfortable. She gave a small nod to Roland. "We're ready to move him to the testing area," she said. Roland walked beside the wheelchair as they rolled it out of the room. The hallway was quieter now. The staff who saw them moved aside respectfully. No one said a word, but something in the air had changed. There was more awareness, more respect. And for the first time that day, the old man wasn't just waiting. He was being seen. The testing area was cool and quiet. Bright lights hung from the ceiling, and machines stood along the walls. Jasmine wheeled the old man into the room and carefully locked the brakes. She placed a light blanket over his legs to keep him warm. "The doctor will be here soon to run a few tests," she said gently. The old man gave a small nod. He didn't speak much, but his eyes showed he was listening. Roland stood near the door, his arms crossed, but his face calm. He watched closely as Jasmine checked the old man's name on the paperwork and made sure everything was in order. A young male doctor walked in, holding a clipboard. He was polite and moved quickly. "Good afternoon, sir," he said to the old man. "I'm Dr. Hamid. I'll be doing your tests today. We'll start with a scan, then take some blood samples." The old man looked up at him. "All right, just do what you need to do." Dr. Hamid smiled kindly and nodded. He helped Jasmine prepare the machine, explaining each step in a simple way. The old man followed the instructions without complaint. Roland stepped aside, letting them work, but he stayed in the room. He wasn't going anywhere until everything was done. As the scan began, the room filled with a soft humming sound. The old man lay still while the machine moved slowly over him. Dr. Hamid checked the screen carefully, writing notes as he went. Jasmine stood nearby, making sure the patient was comfortable the whole time. Outside the testing room, a few nurses gathered quietly. One of them whispered to another, "That's the director's uncle. He waited for hours without care." "I heard," the other nurse replied. The director wasn't happy. The nurse who had refused to treat the old man earlier walked past them. She heard their whispers but didn't say anything. She kept walking, her face serious. She seemed deep in thought. Back inside, the scan was finished. Jasmine helped the old man sit back up. Dr. Hamid stepped forward with a calm voice. "We'll run the blood tests now. Just a small pinch, then we're done." The old man nodded. He didn't flinch as the needle went in. Jasmine handed him another cup of water afterward. Roland looked at Dr. Hamid. "When will we get the results?" "Some today, the rest by tomorrow morning," the doctor answered. "But nothing looks alarming so far." Roland nodded. "Thank you." Once everything was done, Jasmine helped the old man back into the wheelchair. They started moving toward a quieter recovery room where he could rest. As they rolled down the hallway, the old man looked up at Roland. "You didn't have to come, but I'm glad you did." Roland placed a hand gently on the back of the wheelchair. "You helped me when no one else did. Now it's my turn." And with that, they continued down the hall, step by step, into a room where the old man would finally be treated with the care he deserved. The recovery room was quiet, with soft lighting and clean white walls. A window showed the view of a small garden outside. Birds moved through the trees, and sunlight touched the window gently. The old man was now resting on a clean bed, his body covered with a warm blanket. Jasmine had helped him settle in, placing a small call button near his hand in case he needed anything. Roland sat in a chair beside the bed. His suit jacket was now folded over the back of the chair. He looked tired, but his eyes stayed focused on the old man. He wasn't just there as a hospital director now. He was there as family. A nurse brought in a tray with water and a light snack. "Let me know if you need anything," she said kindly before stepping out of the room. The old man slowly turned his head toward Roland. "This place is nice," he said, his voice a little stronger than before. "Better than that waiting room." Roland gave a small nod. "You should have been brought here earlier. That shouldn't have happened." The old man shook his head. "Things like that have happened before. I've learned to sit quiet and wait." Roland's hands tightened slightly. "That doesn't make it right." For a moment, both men sat in silence. The sounds of the hospital hallway were faint behind the closed door. Machines beeped quietly in the room, showing stable signs. The air felt calm, but there was still a heaviness in the room that neither of them could ignore. A soft knock came at the door. Jasmine stepped in holding a small folder. "These are the first results," she said, handing it to Roland. "The doctor will explain more soon, but most of it looks fine. There's nothing serious right now." Roland let out a quiet breath. "Thank you, Jasmine." She smiled, then turned to the old man. "You're doing well. Just rest now, and we'll check on you again soon." After she left, the old man looked at the ceiling. "You've done well, Roland. This hospital, it's clean, full of good people." "Some good people," Roland said, "but not all. That nurse from earlier, she didn't even want to step into your room." The old man didn't respond right away. He seemed to think for a while. "Maybe she'll think about what she did," he said softly. Maybe next time, she'll treat someone better. Roland looked at him with respect. You're always more patient than I am. The old man gave a tired smile. Sometimes being patient is all a man can be. Roland leaned back in his chair. Not today. Not this time. I'll speak to the staff myself. What happened to you won't happen to anyone else under my watch. The old man didn't reply, but the look in his eyes said everything. For the first time that day, he knew someone truly stood beside him, and that made all the difference. Later that afternoon, Roland stepped out of the recovery room. He walked through the hallway with a steady pace, his face serious. Nurses and staff moved aside as he passed, sensing that he was on a mission. He wasn't just visiting anymore, he was taking action. He reached the staff meeting room and opened the door. Inside, a few nurses and assistants were having a break. The same nurse who had stood by the door earlier that day was sitting at the table with a cup of coffee in her hands. She looked up as Roland entered. The room went quiet. I need a few minutes, Roland said calmly but firmly. No one left. He stepped forward, looking at each person in the room. Some of you may know what happened earlier. An elderly patient sat in a room for hours without care. He was ignored by someone who was supposed to help him. The nurse lowered her eyes. She didn't speak. That man, Roland continued, was not just any patient. He is family to me. But even if he wasn't, he still deserved respect. He still deserved attention. The room stayed silent. The air felt heavy. Roland looked directly at the nurse. I'm not here to embarrass anyone. I'm here to remind all of you why we do this job. Every patient who walks through those doors matters. Whether they are rich or poor, old or young, black or white. We don't get to choose who deserves care. We give it to everyone. The nurse slowly stood up. Her hands were shaking slightly. I didn't mean to hurt anyone, she said. I just thought someone else would handle it. Roland didn't raise his voice. You don't have to be perfect, but you have to be present. You have to try. She nodded quietly. I understand. He looked at the others. This is a chance to do better, not just for him, but for everyone who comes here. This hospital is a place of healing, not a place where people feel invisible. One of the younger nurses spoke up. We're with you, sir. We'll do better. Roland gave a small nod. Good, because I'm going to make sure training is done again for everyone, not just on skills, but on how we treat people. He turned to leave, then paused. Thank you for listening. And remember, patients may forget your name, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. As Roland walked back to the recovery room, the hallway felt different. Some of the staff who had once looked away now looked at him with quiet respect. A few even nodded. Back in the recovery room, the old man was resting. Jasmine was checking his chart. Roland stepped in and took his seat again beside the bed. The old man opened one eye slightly. Went to shake things up, huh? Roland smiled faintly. Just made sure they remembered who we're here for. The next morning, sunlight poured gently through the window of the recovery room. The old man was awake, sitting up with the help of pillows behind his back. His face looked more relaxed now, his breathing steady. Jasmine walked in with a fresh chart in hand and a warm smile. Good morning, sir, she said. You slept well. Better than yesterday, he replied with a quiet chuckle. Thank you for checking on me. She nodded and moved to check his blood pressure. Your results came in. Nothing serious, but the doctor will go over everything with you soon. We just need to adjust some of your medicine. The old man nodded, feeling relieved. Jasmine finished her checks and noted everything down. A few minutes later, Dr. Hamid entered the room. He greeted both of them and sat down beside the bed. Your tests show some minor heart issues, he explained. Nothing life-threatening, but you'll need to follow up with a specialist. We'll give you the details and set the appointments. The old man listened carefully and nodded. I'll do what needs to be done. Dr. Hamid looked over at Roland, who had just walked in with a coffee in hand. He's stable, the doctor said. He can go home later today if he's feeling strong enough. Roland smiled. That's good news. After the doctor left, the old man looked at Roland. You've been here since yesterday. Don't you have work? Roland sat in the same chair by the bed. You are my work right now. Everything else can wait. There was a short silence. Then the old man asked, Did you talk to that nurse? Roland nodded. Yes, I spoke to all of them. She understood what went wrong. She was quiet, but I think she's thinking about her actions. People learn in time, the old man said. Sometimes they just need to be reminded. Roland agreed. We're starting new training this week. Kindness should be just as important as knowledge in a hospital. The old man leaned back slightly, looking at the ceiling. I remember when you were just a boy, running around with books too heavy for your hands. Now you're out here fixing hospitals. Roland smiled. You're the one who made sure I stayed in school. I just followed your advice. Just then, there was a soft knock at the door. The same nurse from the day before stood there. Her hands were at her sides, not crossed. Her face looked more open, less cold. May I come in? She asked. Roland looked at the old man. He nodded. She stepped in slowly. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I should have helped you yesterday. I was wrong. The old man looked at her calmly. Thank you for saying that. She gave a small nod, then quietly turned and walked out. Roland looked at his uncle. Maybe change is already beginning. The old man gave a quiet smile. Sometimes it just takes one moment to wake people up. A few hours later, the old man was ready to leave the hospital. Jasmine came in with a wheelchair, helping him sit up and place his feet gently on the floor. He moved slowly, but his body looked stronger than the day before. His face was calm, and his eyes were focused. We'll send your medicine to the pharmacy near your home, Jasmine said. Your follow-up appointment is already scheduled, and someone will call to remind you. Thank you, the old man replied, holding the armrest as she guided him into the chair. Roland stood by the doorway, holding a folder with all the discharge papers. He looked proud but also thoughtful. He had made sure every step of his uncle's care was done right from that moment forward. As they wheeled him through the hallway, some of the staff who had seen what happened the day before nodded at him. A few offered smiles. Others stood quietly, clearly understanding something important had taken place in their hospital. The nurse who had once ignored the old man stood near the nurse station. When she saw him coming, she stepped aside respectfully. She didn't speak, but she nodded at him. It was a small gesture, but it meant something. The old man met her eyes for a brief second and gave a slow nod in return. As they reached the hospital entrance, the sun was shining outside. A soft breeze moved through the trees in front of the building. Jasmine helped the old man settle in the back seat of Roland's car, making sure he was comfortable. Take care of yourself, she said, and don't forget to press that call button next time. No more waiting quietly. He smiled slightly. I'll remember. Roland got in the driver's seat and looked at Jasmine through the window. Thank you for everything, he said. Just doing my job, sir, she replied. As the car pulled away, Jasmine stood for a moment watching it leave. Inside, the old man looked out the window at the hospital building getting smaller in the distance. Things are changing, he said quietly. Roland glanced at him. They are. And it started with you. The ride home was peaceful. Trees lined the road, and the sky was clear. The old man closed his eyes for a moment, just resting. He wasn't thinking about what had gone wrong. He was thinking about how it had been made right. And somewhere back in that hospital, staff were still talking about what had happened. They weren't whispering anymore. They were learning. They were remembering. At a red light, Roland looked over and said, "Oh, and by the way, if you're watching this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. There are more stories that matter, just like this one." The light turned green, and the car moved forward, quietly, simply, but full of purpose, just like the man they had nearly forgotten, but now would never ignore again.